Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to everyone joining us from the West Coast. I'd like to first welcome you to our first ever expert panel, how music ops pros are leveraging tech to streamline operations. My name is Miles Carter, and I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at Trolley. Our goal with this panel is to generate some good conversation about the challenges that operation folks behind the scenes at many music companies have faced, where the industry has grown and shifted over the last few years, how tech is impacting music, and where our panelists see the industry moving next. This is not an infomercial for Trolley, but I do want to take 30 seconds to introduce who we are and what we do before handing control over to Paul, our moderator for the day. Trolley is the payouts OS for growing music companies. Trolley lets operations and finance teams onboard artists faster, deliver exceptional recipient experiences, simplify royalty payouts and tax processes, and reduce overall processing times. Our mission is to build the payouts platform for today's internet-based economy. We partner with businesses of all sizes to help them reach workers from all corners of the world and offer creators, on-demand workers, artists, and suppliers opportunities to bring their specialized talents to a global market. So if you want to hear more about us, visit trolley.com/contact-trolley, or simply visit trolley.com and open a chat window in the bottom right-hand corner. That's the pitch on Trolley. I'm going to jump into who our speakers are and then hand control over to our moderator. Unfortunately today, Christine Barnum was supposed to join us. She's not feeling great today, a little under the weather. So we have two speakers and our moderator, Paul Resnikoff, here today. So our first speaker is Jeff Price. He is the co-founder and CEO of Word Collections, which licenses rights across music, spoken word, and comedy to streaming services, digital broadcasters, and audiovisual services. With a wealth of experience in the industry, Jeff has been a driving force behind several groundbreaking ventures. Jeff founded TuneCore, a music distribution and publishing administration platform, in 2006, and Audium, a company that locates metadata for every sound recording of a specific composition, recovering mechanical rights due to songwriters, composers, and music publishers. We also have Jack Cyphers, the founder and CEO of BorderFox, who has a background in entertainment, SaaS, and fintech. He has experience developing, growing, and branding global entertainment companies and knows the industry's ecosystem of players, trends, and mechanics. As EVP and GM of commercial royalty management at Utopia Music, Jack is also responsible for researching and forecasting developments of big data, intellectual property, and entertainment, and improving the forecasting development process. Throughout his career, Jack has served as managing director at Exactuals, COO at Shazam, and contributed to the first major label digital footprint. Finally, we have our moderator, Paul Resnikoff. Paul is a highly accomplished figure in the music industry, having served in various roles over the past 2 decades. He's best known as the founder and publisher of Digital Music News, a leading news source for music industry professionals worldwide that he has been running since January 2003. With that, I'm going to bring our panelists in, and we will start the conversation. Just one moment. So, Paul, I'm going to hand off to you. Thanks very much, and let's see where the conversation goes.
Indeed. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul, as Miles told you, and thank you, Miles, for that amazing introduction. You really made me look good out there. One thing I wanted to say before we jump into the discussion is, if you have any questions, please throw them into this Q&A or question module here within Zoom, because I want to take questions live, real time, and sort of keep the discussion dynamic and maximally engaged here to what people hope to get out of this webinar. So Jack, Jeff, Absolute pleasure to have you. And let's dig into the weeds of fintech and music operations and artist payouts.
I look
Perfect.
like
No,
a
thanks for
Swedish
having us.
Indian.
Definitely.
You
So-
guys have these great backgrounds, and I'm like, I'm in solitary confinement. Sorry.
Really? No, it looks you got a really nice, like the ski chalet vacation background going on there.
There you go.
Okay,
Oh
that's enough.
man,
Thank you.
that was just the start of a humble brag, looks like. On background.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff is counting the money in front of the poor people.
Gold records on the wall and the better names. So, you know, you
Yes.
BorderFox about. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, one thing actually I should note that I think might have been left out of your bio, Jeff, is so you're the co-founder of TuneCore, which is really one of the first, if not the first, music distribution platforms out there. When was TuneCore co-founded?
So TuneCore was founded in 2005. CD Baby was actually, I mean, there were other entities doing it, it being distributing music into digital services. CD Baby sort of was groundbreaking, that allowed any artist to have access. But the major differentiation point from TuneCore for everybody else is it just didn't take any money when the music was sold. It was just a simple flat upfront fee. You pay, you know, like FedEx here will pay X, and then the music goes into the digital services, and when it sells, you get all the money. So that was an idea in 2005, and it launched in that was October 2005 and went live January of 2006.
Okay, and just shifting over to Jack. So you've had considerable experience over on the label end. So what was happening at the labels when you first started to see these sort of DIY distribution platforms emerging? Do you remember some of the discussions?
I do. I mean, I was in radio for a long time and then segued over to labels. And I'm trying to think when digital kicked in. Was it Island and Priority? And then probably, I think when I was at RCA, digital had just kind of started with Napster. And, I was like, can we go in and partner with these guys? And it was like, no, kid, we're going to go fight them, go do your job. And when I got over to run Tommy Boy, then Tom Silverman was a big pragmatist in the space, and we started moving ahead that way. But the change was, I would say mid 90s, and the business was forced to change because everyone was too arrogant and cavalier about this.
By the way, for anyone who wants a sort of condensed history of what was going on in this space, so it's funny, Jack, you mentioned the 90s, because that is when the rumblings were starting. But even as far as 2005, 2007, 2008, there was still a lot of resistance and fighting, and there was not an embrace, I don't think, from the major label side. There is a pretty interesting Netflix series out there called The Playlist, and it's based on a book about Spotify. It goes through the origins of Spotify and how they were interfacing with the major labels, particularly in Sweden, which was the epicenter for everything that was happening there. Interesting look. As someone who was a little more nuanced on a lot of the details, there was a lot they had to leave out, but it gives a good look, I think, at the interplay between technology and major labels and the established music industry. So let me ask you guys, when it comes to music payouts, money being collected and paid out, whether it is to an artist, IP owner, publisher, or whomever, what is the state of music payouts in the music industry on a scale of 1 through 10? So 1 being absolute awful, no one's getting paid. 10 being everyone's getting paid within 24 hours. Where are we 1 through 10? Jeff, give me your assessment.
Well, it's important to know there's different areas of income, right? There's sound recordings, and then there's the underlying musical composition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dolly Parton wrote "I Will Always Love You." Arista Records hired Whitney Houston to record it. So 2 different income streams. For the sound recording side, my experience is it's a nuanced question, Paul, and Jack will help me out here. It also depends on the usage type, because there's audio only. That's like a stream on a Spotify or iTunes or a download. And then there's audio visual, which is like a TikTok or a YouTube. So you've got all these different usage types. So I'm going to stick with, let's just start with interactive streaming services like Apple Music and Spotify and Amazon. And on the sound recording side, it's pretty good, right? My experience has been the necessary technology was created. The record labels provide information to the digital service provider. We call those DSPs, right? So a Spotify, there's information delivered to them. There's not a lot of mess around the information usually as to who controls the recording, and the money is remitted back on a monthly basis based on a negotiated royalty rate. The underlying musical composition is a lot more complex. So for the sound recording, I'll put that at like a 7-ish, 7 to 8. And for the underlying musical composition, that's the cluster mess. That's the one where Spotify, despite all of its touting of, fixing pirating, actually stole, in my opinion, the musical compositions in the United States. They just infringed on copyright while claiming not to fix the pirating problem. They were literally pirating for the musical composition. But the National Music Publishing Association steps in and has been there all along, and they basically created the mess that we have today, where ultimately on this side for the musical composition, I'll put that at like a 3. It's a mess. And the
so somewhere in the middle of everything out.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, not to cut you off. I was just going to say, if you balance out 1, which is a 7, not horrific, and then a 3, all right, we're about in the middle of where we should be.
Anyway, that's my opinion. And the challenge that I see is the traditional legacy music industry doesn't want to fix this. They're very happy to have big piles of money that they don't know who it goes to, and then they pass laws that make it legal to steal it and give it to the legacy industry based on market share. And that's an endemic problem that we have in this industry.
Okay, so I'm going to put a huge bookmark on that one to come back to it, because that's a huge part of the music payout ecosystem for sure. Jack, give me your rating. So Jeff broke it down.
I would say Jeff spot on, probably about a 7, just because it is so subjective by company. We're working in an ecosystem where this is how it's done. This is how it's been done, going back to what we were talking about in terms of digital, and being forced to change. I think, companies that are pragmatic, you look at Word Collection, or you look at some of these others that are kind of ahead of the curve and changing that, they are paying faster because they want to. That's the differentiator. And I think that's where everything changes, right? So if you're about paying things very quickly, you can get the data, you've got the system. That's your choice as a label, as a publisher, as a distributor, to pay out as quickly as you want based on the income streams coming out, So obviously you have monthly, quarterly, semesterly payments, but as things move faster, you're going to see more real time. That's up to, how you're processing it internally and how it goes out. So that's kind of my take more on the fintech side of things and what we're seeing in the industry. But to Jeff's point, there's a reason people sit on the money, right?
Okay, so really interesting theme coming from both of you guys, which is, you've got platforms like Trolley, you've got mechanisms, you've got technology to pay people within a rapid period of time, accounting, metadata, and all of that. So is it a matter of, maybe I already know your answer to this question, but is it a matter of just companies not wanting to embrace these tools to ensure proper payouts for various devious reasons?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I mean, there's so many factors because, Jeff and I talk about this too, is do you really want to fix your data? Are you on top of your data? Are you monitoring all of this? Are you all over your statements? Do you know who to attribute to, right? Do you know how much it is? And then how accurate are you with your payments? Are you working with your payees? There's a whole stream of this that basically puts it all together for a company, but it's subjective. It's how serious are you? Do you really know your business? So if you look at the majors versus an indie, which typically knows its SLO, they know exactly who their audience is. They know where all their music is. They know how all their metadata is. It's apples and oranges, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I want to make it more robust and like argue with Jack, but I don't. I agree with him. The technology and the information in most cases exists in order to correct the problem and get people paid the money they've actually earned. The challenge is there are reasons not to correct the problem. And a business model has been built around inefficiency. The traditional music industry has never been very good at royalty accounting. It's just not their sweet spot. And if you go back to the days before digital and you get it used to be, there would be guesstimates. Nobody knows what exactly sold. You only know what you shipped, and you would calculate a royalty. It was a complex equation. And frankly, royalty accounting was the redheaded stepchild of the music industry. The music industry was about creating art and culture and monetizing the fame that came around that, right? And the royalty accounting was the thing they kind of had to deal with. They never really got it right. And if someone got big enough and they yelled loud enough, they would get an advance. All right, here's another $2 million. Now shut up, right? So the accuracy was never there. Then you lump digital on top of it, which is technology. And the Warner Music Group is not going to make a smartphone any more than Apple is going to write the song Hotel California. So the two entities don't really talk the same language. And the major music companies fell back on the system they already had, which is around, let's just do guesstimates and pay advances. Now what's happening is the DIY sector, the TuneCores, the distro kids, CD babies, et cetera, come into the market. And the DIY, the do-it-yourself constituency shows up. And all of a sudden, this whole diaspora, a collection of artists that never had access into the ecosystem before, because labels were the gatekeepers, are now distributing over 1 million new sound recordings a month and creating more copyrights than the entire traditional industry did in 20 years, right? And they've now gained market share. The problem is they're not organized. They don't have a collective voice. They don't have an infrastructure. So the money that they're generating now is being slothed over to the traditional industry that have control over things like the Music Modernization Act, lobbying groups, and they have the muscle based on the legacy to go into a digital service and negotiate terms to their benefit. And these guys don't even know their pockets are being picked. It's very upsetting. It doesn't need to be this way. It is a choice.
What about organizations like Merlin that are advocating for the indie side? Is that not covering it?
I don't want to dominate here. I can certainly respond, but Jack, if you'd like to go first, I don't mind.
No, I find I think it's a combination of all these things. Everyone has the best intentions, right? But then I think, Jeff, another part of it is how the data goes out, how it's ingested by each DSPs. There are data standards, even though there are 22 data points that we all look at, from something as basic as an ISRC to the artist, to the title, to the genre. How it's ingested is completely different. And then how it's aggregated from, say, a distributor is totally different too. And then let's just say, there's a migration from TuneCore to the Orchard. They have different pipes and data too. That's all feeding these different DSPs. So to get back to your question, Paul, I think, organizations like Merlin have the best intentions, but the onus isn't necessarily, it becomes on them, but you're also dealing with all these disparate parties that are trying to get their money. So everyone's kind of at fault. I think they're trying to help the situation, but I also feel the business is becoming more fragmented just because of this level of aggregation or mass aggregation.
I view Merlin as a good thing. So Merlin is an organization that came out of Europe that represents the interests of a collection of non-major record labels, independent record labels. And it allows them to gel together and then use the collective benefit of their market share to negotiate deal terms to the betterment of their members, which I think is a good thing, which is what all the organizations do, right? That's what Merlin does. That's what the RIAA does. That's what NMPA does. That's what SONA does. All these organizations represent the interests of their members. And that's kind of where the breakdown occurs, because we're all, to Jack's point, we're compartmentalized and fragmented. So interests aren't always aligned from group to group. For example, Sony, Universal, and Warner own 17.5% of Spotify and as equity, as stock, before it went public. So when Spotify went public, they each were able to gross around $1 billion that they didn't contractually need to share back with the artists or songwriters that helped them get there, right? So you have a misalignment of interest where it's not to Sony, Warner, or Universal's benefit to stymie Spotify from going public because Spotify is infringing on copyright, because they'll make more money on the other side. Or if you Sony, the record group owns Sony ATV Music Publishing, the music publishing group. And you'll find typically that Sony ATV, the music songwriters, will be sacrificed somewhat to the benefit of the record label side because there's more money here. Whereas if you go to a DIY artist, they're all these things at once. They're the record label, they're the performing artist, they're the songwriter. So they're in, and they don't have equity positions in these companies. So they don't benefit when it goes live. So you have a misalignment of interests. And then to Jack's point, there's so many different pieces to the pipeline. You talk about where does this break down? First, you got to get the information out. Is it all the same? Is it uniform? Or do different places have it in different formats? Right? You've got all these different databases where information goes. Then when it's in the database, if you have a recording, who wrote the song that got recorded? And you need to connect those things. And that information differs. And then even if that happens, then you have to get to royalty calculations, which vary country by country based on different laws or regulations and nuances. And then once that happens, then you got to figure out how does the money flow, right? A mechanical royalty doesn't work the same way a public performance royalty works. And so the pipelines for the way the money flows and all the hands that dip into it and money gets lost and drips through and the inefficiencies. And then this perverse part of the industry, which says, hey, if we can't do our job, we can make more money. And there's a perverse benefit being bad at being a publishing administrator, because the less money you get for your songwriter, the more ends up in what's called a black box. And then you get an allocation of that based on your market share. And you can't really pay that back to the songwriters because you don't know whose money it is. So you get to keep more of it. There's so many different pieces.
Question. There, very interesting. There's actually a question from the audience. Jeremy Stern asks, how much is in those piles of money for music composition? So how big is the black box?
It's large.
I'll
give you an actual number.
Yeah.
The Mechanical Licensing Collective came into existence through the Music Modernization Act, and it became an entity where the digital music services would give the mechanical royalties, and then the Mechanical Licensing Collective would collect all that money. There's no requirement under the Music Modernization Act for the Mechanical Licensing Collective to pay any of it. There's no penalty if they don't. When the Mechanical Licensing Collective came into existence, all the money for mechanicals that was earned basically from streams before 2021 that was unpaid was handed to it. That was about $427 million, so close to $500 million. Okay, that was from historical to January of 2021. Move forward in time, we're now estimates put it about $760 million, so $750 million sitting just with the Mechanical Licensing Collective, just for streams in the United States that are unpaid. Now, the Copyright Royalty Board, which is a 3-panel judge that in the United States determine what mechanical royalty rates are, determined there will be a retroactive increase in mechanicals from 2018 to 2021. So there's going to be more money coming into the MLC. Estimates put that at about another 600 to 700 million. So by the middle of this year, just in the United States, just from streams, just for mechanical royalties, you're looking at $1.4 billion. Now, extrapolate that out to the rest of the world, and you're easily looking at a couple $2 billion globally.
Yeah, I think we're probably at about 3.2 billion if you're tracking everything. And I think, again, it's nebulous because Jeff and I were talking, I think, earlier in the week about this. And it's like, it's really hard to break it down by territory. It's designed on purpose, I think, to be this way. And, we're getting to it. But the question, again, is that who does it go to? And to your point with the CRB or anyone else, again, these systems, whether it's the MLC, I mean, anyone, we know who's getting the money, and the proper singer-songwriters aren't necessarily being attributed to. And then we're also back to bad data again. I won't go into the litany of that. You and Melanie can address that later.
There's a couple audience contributions to this thread as well, which are interesting. David Boxenbaum says PRL black box is estimated at 3 to 5 billion. That it sounds, hey, good to me. I know that estimates I've heard are that the black box grows by 1.4 billion annually. So that's another figure I've heard. Daniel Ward says at least 40 to 60% of song shares are unidentified on streaming platforms, and that's the most sophisticated ones. Okay, huge problem. How can a company, just going back to the atom level of a company, managing IP, managing artists, trying to pay artists and IP owners, what is the solution to sort of fixing and not contributing to the black box? What are some steps companies can take? And I throw this out to Jack, why don't you start with that? And I'll toss it over to Jeff
I
as well.
mean, it comes back to the same thing, and we've already touched on it, several times. It's the data. How good are you? The other part of it is humans. Like, we keep discounting the fact that it's humans that are messing this up just from the beginning. But without that data, we don't know who to pay. And the challenge is with singer-songwriters too, what we've realized, it's more about recognition than attribution. If they would realize it's more about the attribution, it gets more accurate. And again, going back to indies that are spot on with their data, Paul and I talked about a use case of a project I worked on that was, it's a very well-known song, which has pristine data. We put it into the ecosystem as a test, and within one semester, it came back with 15,000 errors and over 5,000 infringements. And that's because, again, going back to it, it's all over the place. And that's where it starts. And then being meticulous with what comes in, what comes out, and being able to match that data. The challenge is, though, as it goes around the globe, there are different data standards, and the different societies as well have different data. Look at CWR. I mean, that's a whole nother mess. So to me, that's where it starts. From there, then, you know who to pay. How much do you pay? And to Jeff's point earlier, when you're doing these calculations, I mean, he dealt with this at TuneCore. You get this lump of money. Now you've got splits. So who's getting that, right? Who's that on? And then from there, it's, how you pay it out and how quickly. But that's such a whole process. You have so many teams, from start to finish doing it. Again, if you're an indie, it's pretty streamlined as a small indie singer-songwriter. If you're Amy Mann or Andy Franco, it's pretty easy, right? But as you get, larger, unless you're like a Simon Wheeler at Beggars, or, Brett at like Epitaph, they know their business. Lewis at Hopeless knows his business. They're meticulous about this, but most people aren't, and they think they're doing the right thing. So to me, that's where it starts. It's these days, it's about the data, and then also catalog data. That's probably one of the bigger issues when you're looking even at Evergreen, on the publishing side of things.
So I agree that some very specific things you can do. If you've got a sound recording statement, okay, and the sound recording statement has details showing what service it's streamed on in what country and how many times and what time frame. Going back, Paul, to your first question, if you know that that's at a 7, it's pretty reliable data, that then can become the truth. Because on the other side of the coin, in the same country, when you're getting paid for the songwriter or music publisher, the numbers should match. If you got 1,000 streams here, you should get paid for 1,000 streams here. So you can audit. And the DIY constituency, oddly enough, are in a better position than artists signed to a major record label or an independent label, because the DIY services like a DistroKid, right? They built robust technology systems to provide this itemized detail that you can get at a click of a button. Whereas if you're signed to a major record label, you're reliant on the Warner Music Group or UMG or Sony to provide that transparency in their statements, which typically they don't do, or it's very hard to get. So you can't even audit. The other really important point. So first thing, get sound recording statements, compare them against the other side and make sure the numbers line up. Know your ISRCs. If you don't know what those are, do that offline. Learn what those are, because that's basically how a database will connect a recording, the ISRC, to the songwriter. You got to connect these things. So if you know this and you know this, you got to make sure they connect. If they're not connected, you got to go fix the data and you can find the payment. The interesting thing is there's a misalignment of interests, whereas the digital services, honestly, I don't want to say they don't care. They do care. It would be disingenuous to suggest nobody cares. That's not true, that songwriters or musicians or artists don't get paid. But the impact to them from a business perspective is irrelevant. They just give a chunk of money now. It's like, here's X, at least here in the United States, here's X. What happens with the X dollars after that has no impact whatsoever on the digital service. How that money gets spread, right? That matters to all of us, but it doesn't impact them from a business perspective. So they have no interest, a business interest, in making sure the money ends up in the right hands. They've handed it off. Now, The music industry, the traditional industry, has built a business model about taking the money that hasn't been paid, the inefficiencies, now a business model. So they don't have an interest, right? And that's where you have the perfect storm where the scales have tilted, in my opinion, too far to the protection of the DSPs, putting no onus or requirement on them to ensure the entities or people that earn the money get paid the money. And then from this side, you have the National Music Publishing Association passing laws that say, fuck it, let's not make sure people get paid, right? Let's just take the money that's not paid and give it to our members, which represent less than 1% of the world's music publishers. That creates a really bad storm to create $3, $4, $5 billion. And I don't know whose money it is. Let's just take it. But track your ISRCs.
I would say, though, take it a step further. That and your ISWCs. This is the biggest problem of all of it, right? So ISRCs are, out there. You can match them. You can figure out, is there a karaoke version? Is there a baby lullaby that I'm not collecting on? But the CWR, we only have maybe, what do you think, Jeff? Out of the 80 million that exist, they're probably, everyone says they've got, 30, 50 million. I think it's more in the line of probably like 18 million, if even that. And to what David Boxenbaum is, putting in the comments here too, that's what we're looking for. The problem is then when you get transparent about things, nobody wants to share what their splits are on the CWR side of things just due to competition. So this further convolutes that whole process. And we've all kind of been saying, oh, we can, fix data. At various companies I've been at, it's this whole idea that, peace, love, and happiness are going to fix everybody's data. But that's been the challenge. And I believe that it's more of a bottom up now thing, and being, I think, with the companies that are more focused on this data than top down. And the data too, the data warehousing, I think it's tremendous. By society, you're looking at this, by distributor. I mean, this all has to go into one place to match. Plus, now, if there's a reversion or I send something to Jeff and that changes, like, what is the system for that? And those are the things we're trying to, deal with every day, I think, to get it better.
It's interesting that you guys bring this up, because I've actually encountered a lot of companies, whether they're hybridized labels, publishing houses, indie labels, whatever, where they really seem to have their game together when it comes to ingestion and payout. But of course, nothing's 100%. But given that you guys are so close to this and even running these operations, what percentage would you say is a good percentage to be collecting and paying out? So if you have a wonderful singer-songwriter who's blown up with a rich catalog of songs across every conceivable platform, across 190 countries, what percentage would you say is good to be collecting and paying out back to the stakeholder and IP owners?
And I'm going to pick up Jack's thread. It is such a nuanced question because of the insanity that exists. For example, when there is a download in the United States, by the way, all we're talking about here is digital. There's also non-digital. We haven't even begun to discuss that in that system. So a download in the United States, there's a mechanical royalty owed. That's basically it for the songwriter. Okay, I'm talking about the songwriter, not for the recording. You go to Europe on a download, okay, the money is split between the right of public performance and a mechanical. And the way the money is split is arbitrary, contingent on the board of directors of local music rights organizations in each country. And then how the money flows is different. Mechanical royalties kind of stop flowing, whereas public performance royalties bounce around from place to place, getting hit or double hit. And then you move into the concept of sub-publishers or publishing administrators, which create pipelines where it goes from you to someone in the United States who reassigns the rights to someone in England, who reassigns the rights to SACEM for pan-European licensing. It gets insane. So it's a great question, Paul. What percentage? I mean, I'd like to think you should get 100% of your money. But the question is, how do you even define that when you don't even know what the royalty rate is, right? You're back here at the beginning of a food chain. There's a stream in Spotify in Germany. GEMA, the local music rights organization in Germany, is doing what's the royalty rate that's even happening there? You don't even know what you're supposed to get. But I would like to think our goal would be to shoot for 100%. It will never happen because nothing in life is perfect. But certainly where we are now is not acceptable. We can do better. We should do better. And we need to stop the legacy industry from propagating and pushing inefficiency as a business model. The NMPA shoved the Music Modernization Act down our throat and wrote a sentence into it that said this law will supersede federal and state financial laws, and we don't have to pay anybody. And if we don't pay anybody, we can take your money and give it to the board members of the MLC disproportionately based on their market share. How is that a good thing? You can't.
Okay,
How are we supposed to swim upstream against that?
Well, you start your company, Word Collections, you've attracted major clientele. So you have, for example, Metallica. So they obviously were not happy or felt that they could improve their percentage payout. So what's the game there? How do you go and get more money for these mega artists and mega bands? Given this calamity.
I take a chapter out of Jack's book. It's all about the data. So I'm a technology company. And the first thing that we do is we identify the sound recordings that exist of a song, the originals, the live versions, the cover versions. So if you have all the recordings that exist of a song and you get an inbound royalty statement, you can see what's not there. Are all the recordings of the songs being paid on? Yes, no. You can check, are those recordings live? Yes, no. Did they stream? Yes, no. So you can begin to determine what's going on. You also check over here, are all the songs getting paid on, right? And then are all the ISRCs getting paid on in each territory? Then you got to go in, is the royalty rate being calculated correctly? Are they paying on time? To Jack's point, are the splits? So if you've got John Lennon and Paul McCartney, each controlling 50% of a song, is the money being divided evenly between them? That's what I focus on, and I believe what Jack focuses on. We build technology systems that can automate analysis and audit of inbound information to identify what's messed up in it. And when you pump out the information, you try to make it as clean as possible. That's why I don't want to be part of the legacy system. I want it to go from the songwriter, the publisher, to me, to Spotify. That's it. Now I'm not part of that insanity over here that benefits when money isn't paid, and it's a one-to-one data exchange, just like with the sound recording, right? That's the way I want to operate, and that's the way I do operate. I just remove middlemen wherever I can, then it's my own data. I still have the problem that someone over here can throw in bad data and create what we call a conflict, so they're claiming to control something that they don't, but at least I have a handle on it. The other way is just a cacophony of insanity that benefits when they don't pay you. So that's what we do. We audit, we identify, and create automated systems to scale to do that.
And I would add to that too, beyond the metadata, then it's the actual data that you're analyzing, right? And so because of the technology, Jeff can basically look at something, be like, this pattern isn't right. We've been tracking something, something's missing. And that's where I think there have been more tools coming to our aid in this, instance. And even, when you are making payments, you can see everything in CMS and connect the dots, basically. You can look at historicals much quicker. You can pull up records like this that beyond the metadata that's missing, something's not right here. Like, in Germany, I'm not seeing as many royalties coming through as I did the period before, 2 periods before there was an average. I'm not seeing that. And again, all these things connect, but it's tough.
It's a whack-a-mole game.
Is there an opportunity? Yeah.
I'm saying it's a whack-a-mole game where even when you get it all straightened out and done, it's like driving down the highway of life. You can be the best driver in the world, but if the jerk in the lane next to you swerves into you, and that's what it's like. You get your data clean, you pump it out, and somebody screws it up. And the next thing you know, you have to go in and redo everything you've already done. So it's a constant monitoring of what's going on.
And I hate saying this, but it's like it's the garbage in, garbage out. Like we all say this, which is ridiculous. And even if you clean up your garbage, the question is, can we, change it from a landfill to at least a waste paper basket? I think that's, everyone's going in this direction, but, we've got so much work to do.
The problem, Jack, is with the garbage in, garbage out, there's no incentive to change it to the waste paper basket, because the more garbage in, garbage out, the more allocation of black box money. And fuck it, let's just take it and hand it to the legacy industry disproportionately based on a market share. That's the problem. There's a benefit to getting it wrong.
Well, and
when it comes to matching, guys, when it comes to matching, it seems like I've noticed over the years that technology matching, now we have AI technology. isn't there a grand opportunity and a better landscape ahead in terms of matching, let's say, ISRCs to ISWCs, spotting bad data, identifying malevolent conflicts and attempts to distort data? Isn't this getting better?
To some degree, I mean, you do have a source of truth with people that are smart enough to do audio fingerprinting. If you look, what Wipro's doing or things like this, these CMOs in a box in different territories that they're trying that, from inception, that audio fingerprint has to be there. It still doesn't, change the errors if it's not matched up. So that could still go out as the fingerprint. But even if the data behind it gets lost or changed somewhere else, you're still, tracking it down.
So we work for, I'm going to sneeze again, I'm sorry. We work for St. Nicholas. Here it goes. Which is the music publishing catalog for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Holly Jolly Christmas, Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. And as you can imagine, there's always new recordings of those every year. So the challenge becomes you can't track something with a fingerprint if it doesn't exist yet. Right. And the sound recording goes off into the ecosystem and you need to catch it at its birth in order to properly track it and identify it. So there's, will artificial intelligence be a solution? Perhaps at some point in the future, some AI robot or system can identify a melody, right? What if I do the klezmer or jazz version or the hip hop version of Rudolph? It's a different melody. Can it hear and understand lyrics? Can it identify if this recording embodies that song? Or what about a medley? It'll get there eventually. It seems to be where technology is heading. Then the question is, do we want it to get there? I keep falling back on,
I agree. I mean, again, this is a game that's been played. I mean, I do consulting, years ago for, companies like Bloomberg or Standard & Poor's. And, I question even sometimes if it ever was a business. For 2 decades, you had this, amazing burgeoning of talent, different sounds. You look at the 60s and 70s. And then after that, I think I remember the first record I played on the radio was like, it was a formula-based record. Everything kind of went in that direction. And when you get there, then there are sales. There are records that were #1 that were never played on the radio, that never sold anything due to the politics within companies. And that also, I think, contributed to where we are now. In terms of royalties, when we were doing 99-cent singles, thanks to Clive, love him. But we sold, lots of records. We had street teams also going into working with SoundScan. I mean, again, it just changes. And I don't know what was credited to or not. Also, how the inner workings of some of the majors work in terms of who's billed what for, advances, even though that might not have been what should have happened. So there are a lot of, to me, the business was always smoke and mirrors. The transparency now that is happening has been, I think, a big relief for most of us that have grown up in this. And that's kind of where the level of accuracy, we're getting better, but at least there's awareness of it. Where before it's like, again, this is how we do it. And Jeff and I were talking earlier about this week. Why do we have to do it the way that this is how we do it? And I think breaking the rules and moving ahead and doing it our own way will also change the business, which it is. And I won't go into some of those, the litany of that, but I think longer tail, when you look at evergreen kind of changing, public domain, all these other things will, I think, make the business or force it to grow up even more so, just due to diminishing returns and a lot of downward spirals to zero once things do get, I think, cleaned, to the level that they need to. But it's definitely something that I think we need to examine, because everything is an aggregate and then fractionalized from there. So if we get into metaverses, you've got 11 different areas potentially that you're going to have micro payments on. Then you get to AR, VR, you combine that with OTT. I mean, it's nebulous.
So you're saying there's a chance this can get better.
Well, no, there will be payments. People still make money. I mean, there's no question about it. It's just how smart you are about it, right? And how you go about doing it and understanding those curves in the business to actually get ahead. So the smart people will continue to make money without question.
The tangible bite-sized things that everybody should do, particularly the DIY constituencies should do, is you should have a spreadsheet, Excel, CSV, Apple, whatever. It should have a list of each sound recording with the name of the recording, the name of the album, right? The ISRC of the recording, a UPC number if you have one, the release date, you should have that in a spreadsheet, track by track. And then you should also include the songwriting information. Who wrote the song? One person, two people, what percentage does each control? To Jack's point, the ISWC, which is a unique identifier given to the song. In what countries, right? You should have that in a spreadsheet. It should be a clean spreadsheet. And every time, if you're lucky enough to have someone cover one of your songs, or you release a new recording, or you do a live version, you add that to the spreadsheet, have that data. That's a start point, because that's how you're going to get your money out of the systems. Now, here's another interesting point. There's a company out of London called the letter C Works Music that I'm very enamored with. And what they do is they're able to plug into the local music rights organizations, or rather they get data. I'm not doing them justice. They're able to do an analysis and say, listen, you're Bono, you're a songwriter from the band U2. We're going to check and see what information exists in the music rights organization in Spain. Now we're going to check what's in France. Now we're going to check what's in Germany, in Italy, in Israel, and so forth and so on. And we're going to compare. And they're able to run an analysis that identifies that the data is not consistent in each country. So what does that mean? So if Bono, and I'm making stuff up here, wrote 400 songs, okay, let's say he wrote 400 songs and wrote 100% of each one of them for simplicity's sake. All 400 are registered in Ireland. That's where he's from, right? So you can see, okay, look, now you go over to Spain and maybe only 298 are registered. Okay, right there, there's a discrepancy, which means the money for those remaining songs that aren't registered isn't getting paid out to Bono. And for the ones that are registered, you compare, do they have the same songwriter information? Do they have the same percentage split? Do they have the same publisher? Does it have the same information? And if it's not, then that's money that's not flowing out. So remember, the data points that Jack is talking about, the complexities that exist, is the data has to go into each country, to each local collection agency, one at a time. And if it's off in one place, that means money isn't flowing. And these collection agencies collect both non-digital, which means things like AM and FM radio and music played in local retail stores, as well as digital, well, sort of. Then you move into the insanity of ICE and AMRA and all this other stuff. But anyway, just things to think about. But yeah, keep a spreadsheet.
There's an additional question I want to bring in from the audience, which actually deals with fraudulent content. So Claudia Lopez asks, how do you leverage technology to detect fraudulent content, or do you handle that part for DSPs? I have something to add to that. I don't know what you guys, any thoughts on fraudulent content?
How do you want us to define fraudulent? Do you mean someone getting a bot to do the streams, or do you mean someone claiming to control the recording that doesn't control it, or the song? Or there's so much fraud.
Yeah.
So let me jump in on one aspect of this. So yeah, that's a good question. There's different areas of it. So one is actually botted or fake streams. So this is bubbled up as an issue over the past couple of years. If you just want to do a little bit of research on that, just type in French Montana fake streams, and you'll get a tip of the iceberg on what's happening with some superstar artists sort of juicing plays. There's also a really good mini sort of documentary with Michael K. Williams, RIP. He was the host of this series on Vice, and one of the sort of underground look series he did was actually on stream farms, which just juice up streams and create these fraudulent plays. Interestingly, we started to do a lot of research in this area. There is a company out of Austria named Legendary, and Legendary is starting to secure a lot of big contracts with major IP owners, major labels, et cetera. And what they do is they just basically do an anomaly detection. So they'll look at a French Montana track, or insert your favorite artist here, and they'll just say, this artist received this many streams on Spotify. How many did they receive for this track on Apple Music, on Amazon Music, on Deezer, on YouTube Music? And then they do a comparison. And generally, if those numbers don't comport or fit into what is generally the spread across these different platforms, then there's a problem. Interestingly, they were telling me that most of the time the errors were lower stream counts, not higher. So it's all the attention went to these fake streams, but actually the issue is that there are different outages or issues, and the stream counts are coming in lower, so the payments are lower. Not because anyone is intentionally trying to do it, it's just there was an outage in Sector 6 or whatever, and so streams from Deezer are not reported on Tuesday or whatever. So yes, so the question coming in from George Monger, Legitary, yeah. So let me spell it out here in the thread. It's spelled Legitary. There you go. Yeah, and yeah, you're right. Nermina is the CEO. So Nermina Mumic. So that's one aspect of fraudulent plays. I don't know if you guys have seen other stuff. There's a lot to talk about in this area too, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a whole different film, or several films. I mean, again, it just depends on your definition of it, and some things that I'm hearing about already. Iceberg. I mean, there's just so many levels of fraud, and then bad actors.
Let me ask, there also seem to be some strange issues. So Jack, you went into the realm of short form video, then into Web3 virtual worlds, and those new fast growing or soon to be emerging arenas. All of these present payout challenges for content IP. What is going on in the front line of short form video? I'm hearing that payouts from Meta are horrifically bad. Twitter's non-existent. There was recently news that negotiations with rights owners had sort of broken down, so there's nothing coming from Twitter. TikTok is sort of just sending out lump checks without a sophisticated system, and YouTube Shorts is sort of getting their own thing. What's going on in this arena in terms of payouts and the operations there?
I mean, they function technically. I mean, I think they're doing what they can. I don't want to say the bare minimum, but it is a business. I don't think that they're necessarily focused on this. I mean, although it's the right thing to do, they've got a fiduciary responsibility for it. But again, it depends on the deals too. And we're back to the data again and how that's coming in, what's going out, and then are they doing the right thing and tracking the data, and tracking nefarious data? Like to me, it's happening. But again, you look at Article 17. There's just another part of this, but it's happening. Is it right? No. Is it the amount that it should be? No. And we all know this, but again, this is how it's done. And I think that's what we're all looking for solutions to, or working closer together. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Going back to the fraud question, I don't know if what I'm saying would actually be helpful. My instinct tells me it is, but the data is the data. We live in a world in the subscription models where it's a pot of money, and you divide the pot of money by the number of streams, and then the money gets paid out proportionately. And I'm a fan of what's called a user-centric model, which is a different model, which says if I, Jeff Price, go to Apple Music and I pay my $10 a month, and I only listen to Franz Ferdinand and the Rapture, that my money should only go to Franz Ferdinand and the Rapture. It shouldn't go to Bette Midler or Liza Minnelli, right? And I feel like, and again, it's a feeling, I have nothing empirical to back it up, that if this was the case, if my money was in a user-centric pot, it would reduce the existing fraud. I'm sure new fraud would pop up, because there wouldn't be a benefit to increase the number of streams, because when you increase the number of streams now, you get a proportion of a larger pot of money. Whereas if you increase my streams now, you still set at the same $10. It wouldn't allow you to dip into other places. And I think that is a better way to do things. And that's one of the things I think about with fraud and botting. In regard to people infringing on copyrights, it's a massive problem I had with TuneCore when we first started. DistroKid does a great job of creating fingerprinting technology and checking other locations to determine if a recording is already live to flag the fraud. before it happens. But then you got other weird fraud. You type in UK DJs iTunes fraud, and you'll find 8 DJs who use stolen credit cards to buy their own music in iTunes. The money got pumped back to like TuneCore, and they generated over $1 million buying their own music using stolen credit cards.
Oh,
Look at LATAM. I think LATAM's an even bigger use case of this. It's insane. You're dealing with drug cartels. I mean, things like this, it goes to that. And going back to you, Jeff, too, I think the concept of user-centric makes sense, right? But then when we get into covers too, I think we've just covered this with some of the other DSPs. Who's getting attributed to as well, right? Is it the actual the artist or who?
No, yeah, it's a good
Right,
point.
guys,
We
well-
have to get the artist level, but anyway.
Yeah.
So hey, not to pull the curtain on the party, but we've got 2 minutes now. So I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to plug themselves, how you can reach them. So for anyone out there, check out digitalmusicnews.com. That's my publication, paul@digitalmusicnews.com, if you want to reach me directly. Jack, Jeff, can you tell people how to reach out to you and connect?
Sure. First thing though, I will say, Paul, God bless Digital Music News, because it, honest to God, is like the only resource that I have access to. No one else covers the space the way you do, and I'm grateful for the coverage because you tackle complex issues that need untangling and coverage. And I'm not just saying that because you're, I mean, honest to God, it's a needed thing. So that being said, yeah, support at Word Collection. So Word Collections provides global publishing administration, right? We provide both digital and non-digital. We cut out middlemen. We go direct using our own data, identifying sound recordings using technology. And the end result is typically 40 to 50% more money, usually 12 months more quickly for the digital. And for the non-digital, it tends to be about 20% more money, 6 months faster. Unlike TuneCore and Audium, which my prior companies, it's more of a gated community. There's certain metrics that we need the client to have. We can't just take everybody on. We're not built for it. But support at wordcollections.com or Jeff, Jeff at wordcollections.com. And I got to come up with a better name. So, we did. I started because I had a non-compete. I couldn't work for musicians for 12 months. So I worked for comedians, people that speak words as opposed to sing them. And once that was over, I can then work for both. And that's what we did.
Right. Okay. Jack.
Jack at BorderFox.com. You can get me that way. What we do is try to find solutions depending on the scale that your company is. You may need a fintech solution. You may need a data solution. We work with a lot of partners that can help you with those challenges based on the size of your company. We also, business intelligence solutions, anything from production music on, there's a gamut of things that we do, but basically it's to streamline your business to get that revenue faster.
Okay. Well, thank you both for your prodigious insights and for educating me on the nuances and complexities here. I hope to end this on a hopeful note. Looks like maybe we'll go from a 3 to a 4 on the publishing side, and hey, maybe on the recording side, 7 to 8. So Miles, are we doing an open QA at this point, or you want to take over? I'm just seeing big QA, or are we pulling the curtain?
No, I'm trying to. I'm here trying to jump back in.
Okay.
So what I wanted to say is we're at an hour. Our panelists, if they have time, we have a handful of questions in the QA. If not, we will try to get them back to everyone. We'll get some answers from Jeff and Jack. We'll send them out over email. We'll make sure that you get the answers to the question you asked today. So guys, do you have a couple minutes? I think we have about 4 questions in the QA. If you can give 10 minutes, I think we can wrap up what's in there.
I'm good with 10 minutes.
Okay. I'm gonna throw it out there. Some of them came in a little earlier while the conversation was going on, but Brennan asked, what do you guys think is the resistance in today's world regarding the advancement or improvement of payouts in the industry?
To use a bad pun, I'm going to sound like a broken record. there is not a business reason to improve. There is a business reason to keep things status quo or have inefficiency, because it creates large piles of money, which then can be taken from those that earned it and disproportionately handed to those that didn't. It's a new income stream, right? Major music companies' market share is decreasing while the DIY constituency's market share is increasing. Majors make money off of their copyrights, but they found a model now where they can make money off of copyrights that they don't control. They make it on their own copyrights and other people's copyrights. Why change that system?
If I could just add
making better
that as well. So if you actually look at the stream counts on Spotify, for example, so as sort of a proxy for the rest of the streaming music ecosystem, the amount of major label artists as a percentage of streams is actually going down. So just to echo what you're saying in the data, Jeff, that is very much happening. To me, it's exciting stuff, because major labels today are not what major labels were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. There are a lot more players in the space. Artists have a lot more options. There are a lot more companies, frankly, that can manage IP and do a better job. So there's a lot of competition out there, which is healthy, but that's certainly validated by the data, Jeff.
And by the way, even the existing pot of money model also works to the majors' advantage, because it disproportionately shifts money from the pot to them on a per stream basis versus a user-centric model. So there is not business incentive.
I totally agree. It is all about that. And again, a lot of these systems that we have are by design, basically, to go back to the majors.
It's really an interesting meta point that's come out of this discussion, which I didn't realize we were going to touch upon so much. But there's the technology, there are the technology providers, there's companies like Trolley, but then there actually has to be a human incentive, and there's the politics, and then there's the whether or not it's going to be implemented. So interesting reality dynamic there.
The irony to me is the payments are like the easiest thing to make. It's everything behind the payments, and getting back to metaverses or all this other stuff. I mean, we have real-time payments now, payment warehousing, it can go like that. The question is getting everything into that.
I don't want to get a Twitter storm against me, but Jack's point is very salient, and it ties into why blockchain hasn't really taken off. I don't need anything that blockchain has to offer in regard to a payment system. It's, to Jack's point, it's the data behind it all. And blockchain doesn't fix that. Now, I know you have an immutable database that's distributed around the world, but that doesn't mean the people entering the data at the immutable beginning are doing it correctly. And it also doesn't mean that the people that are using the music know what rights types they need and how to calculate the royalties. So it doesn't really solve a problem for me. It could solve problems for others, but it's part of the challenges with why I don't embrace it. It's like, I don't need it. Like, that's not my problem. Anyway.
So I've got an interesting question here that comes from a bit of what we were talking about in this last question, and sort of the new tech. So there seems to be an incentive to create AI generated music, especially among the majors, to maximize as a profit maximizing business model. Will AI music crowd out human music creation, and how might royalty payments or copyright law need to be used or need to be changed to combat this issue?
That's a whole film, and like copyright in itself, I think, is the bigger thing that we're all debating right now. Whose is it, right? Even like with ChatGPT, if I put something in there, I fed their algorithm, their database, it's giving me something back. Is it mine? Is it theirs? I mean,
and just to jump on that too, wildly open gray questions. I agree, Jack. There are already some precedents that are starting to emerge, though, which I wanted to point to. So the United States Copyright Office has already declared that when it comes to copyright registrations, they will not register content that was generative AI. So basically, if an AI creates something whole cloth without any human involvement, that is not a protected copyright according to the US Copyright Office. There's also a huge dichotomy emerging between the terms really haven't been established yet, but I'll just call one assistive or assisted AI, and the other being the generative AI I mentioned earlier. So assistive is sort of an example would be using AI to help stimulate creativity or to generate another idea. So if you're trying to finish lyrics and you fire up ChatGPT, as you were saying, Jack, then maybe ChatGPT, like an old world thesaurus, but in a much broader and more sophisticated way, could help you kind of finish out your lyrics. Or maybe you're struggling with a melody, it doesn't feel like it's got the right hook. Okay, so AI can sort of help you there. So that's assisting you. However, that would in the end be protected by copyright in the current copyright system, because you're the one who says, I made this. So
but
there might
then
be
going back to the data again, it depends on how that was changed. And Jeff can speak to this much better than I. If we get to hash technology, even in metadata, and the lawsuits going back and forth, where I think with Genius and Google, where it was actually illegal. Now there's a LinkedIn one that it is legal. So again, I think this is all up for debate, even though it's similar metadata versus, actual copyright. So.
Think about something like auto-tune. One could argue auto-tune is a type of AI, but an assisted AI. Yeah, I think it remains to be seen. I have no idea how this is going to shake out, but I'll always fall back to the movie Watergate, about the Watergate Hotel, where Deep Throat turns to the reporters and just says, look, follow the money. Follow the money. Because that's usually where things end up going.
Yep.
The other thing is, Jack, I didn't want to create the misimpression that there's any solid ground or resolution on this. It's not the first inning. I mean, the stadium hasn't even been built. So
there are a couple people that we're dealing with, or I've got some things that we've been having discussions where there are several titles. They're all AI generated, but from an original work of the actual songwriter. And they're getting some pushback in terms of if that's theirs or not, and if they're going to get paid on it, and is it fraudulent? And that's due to different situations with DSPs, but how certain organizations are actually looking at it. I can't name the organizations, but I think we can put two and two together. So that's becoming an issue too, and we're going to see more of it. And I had a discussion with someone a few weeks ago where this is a business now, right? So you have to make money. And this is what's kind of sad for DIY is, and if you look at, I talked to Michelle about this at Songwriters of North America too, which they're representing, but if you're doing one or two songs in your underwear in the basement on your Mac, that can be something, but then you actually have to make business, and make money in the business. And that's where some of these more successful songwriters, if you will, compound their businesses.
There's also a really interesting meta thought when you start pondering, what AI is actually doing. So, AI is ingesting, whether it's musical AI, whether it's lyrical AI, where it's ChatGPT, whatever, is basically in sort of a machine learning way, just ingesting thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of different sources to create something that is sort of an amalgamation of these things and is so-called new. If you sort of go back 50 years, well, the greatest musicians were also that. So you ask a great musician, if you could sit Jimi Hendrix down and just say, who are your biggest influences? And, he might say, B.B. King, Muddy Waters. He might go through a bunch of different artists. But in reality, a super artist like Jimi Hendrix or any other prodigious genius level artist is actually pulling upon thousands or hundreds of thousands of different musicians that go back to Bach and earlier. So we're kind of seeing the technological replacement for musicians in the past who also pulled on so many different influences. So from a meta standpoint, you can argue one side or the other, and it just becomes almost impossible to land at a happy resolution on this matter.
Yeah.
So on that point, Paul, I think we're kind of getting close to time, but I wanted to end with one question. And I think you talked about trying to find let's end on a happy note. Let's take your note there and let's end on a happy note. So there's two questions. I think they kind of can meld together. Kevin asked about, do you foresee a tech solution that can fix bad historical metadata, or should we just focus on good metadata going forward in the future? And another person asked, what do you foresee as the next big tech breakthrough for royalties? And we can extend that to royalties, payouts, licensing, all of the areas where we're looking. Guys, let's end on a happy note, or at least an optimistic note. Let's try to find something where we think that we're going to go, where we can find improvement.
I mean, I think this is optimistic despite the reality of the situation, right? Like we're all working on this. It's not to say, we know which systems are in place. I think a lot of us are doing the right thing in trying to encourage our colleagues, constituents, songwriters to move ahead with this, right? This is how you have to, we have to it's a lot of hand holding is what I've realized with a lot of singer-songwriters. I've got to get with them. They're like, I got all the data back. That's great. What do I do with it? You've got to help them now. It's like, okay, you have to register this at Sound Exchange. There was a problem here at Cobalt. You've got to do all these things. They're like, okay, but I don't want my business manager to be upset with me. Then there's the next step where it's like, well, we will work with them to get it done. So to answer the question, I think it's working with each other. I don't know in that bigger picture if we'll get all of it, but even if it's a portion, I was telling someone and they were shocked. I think even if we can get to maybe even 35% success rate, that's a huge success rate for the business. So I think this is positive.
Yeah. So the information is power. And the reason you hear me hitting on it so hard in the topics I'm discussing is people need to know. We got to start with you understanding or having the foundation upon which to build on. You need to know that the Music Modernization Act didn't do what it professed to do, because now you have something to build off of, right? And once you begin to have that knowledge and an understanding of what can be corrected and how, you can begin to make informed decisions and work towards a common goal together. You're all marching to the beachhead together, because one individual isn't going to change all this. I try. Lord knows I try, so does Jack, but we can't do it on our own. So the upside is, yeah, the wonderful thing about technology, it provides the ability to have complete transparency. The analog world, you never can have it. It's guesstimates. Digital world, you can have it because server arrays and systems keep track of everything. So that's the upside. In regard to metadata, the legacy data and the new data, of course you can fix and I don't mean this to the question, Nair, who asked the question. Yes, you can fix the past metadata. It's never going to be perfect. It's work. It takes work. It's called work for a reason. You put a line in the sand and you go, look, from this point forward, we're going to operate this way, but here's all the old data. Let's dig into it. It's a finite world of information. It's a lot, but you can break it off in chunks and do a little bit at a time. And yes, you can clean up the past. You have to want to clean up the past, right? And then on the go forward, you can implement new architectural requirements or technology or infrastructure to make sure that the problems of the past don't replicate in the future. For example, when a sound recording is distributed to a music service, it must be required to include the underlying information for the songwriter and publisher with the percentage splits. And if it doesn't, that sound recording does not go live. There's a starting point. I understand it might not be accurate, but it's certainly going to be better than it is now. So that's, yes, you can clean up the past. And then as far as vision for the future, to me, the problem isn't the technology. It's all there and it will only get more efficient. It's kind of like an iPhone, right? I mean, it's getting faster and better, but it's still an iPhone. So we've got the technology. It's going to get better and faster. We need the business reason and the human will to implement it.
And I think you nailed it, Jeff. I mean, again, it's education and humans. I mean, those are the two things I think that we keep coming back to.
You know, if I could also offer an upbeat tone at the end. So one thing I've really learned here is that when it comes to actually making accurate payouts and ingesting metadata and trying to do a good job, the technology is making it more possible than ever. I will note that in the actual real world of the music industry, I'm noticing that some companies, hybrid labels, publishing houses are actually using tech, faster payouts, better metadata, all of these aspects to gain a competitive advantage. So when an artist goes out there in this new ecosystem in which you have a lot more players, a lot more competition to work with, a savvy artist can now look at a hybrid label and say, hey, what are my payouts going to be? Am I going to get paid in 30 days or is it going to take 300 days? So the upside is that companies that do want to implement this technology can do a lot better job, and artists and IP owners can get paid a lot faster as a result.
And that's what I was saying in the beginning of the conversation. I think when we started, it's up to the actual company and making that decision to do the right thing and to be able to have that technology and that mentality to pay out faster. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
This is great, guys. And thank you very much. Paul, you segued into our next session that we're going to be holding in May We will be talking about the creator economy table stakes, what companies need to offer to land successful partnerships with creators, with artists. And we will be talking with 3 artists on the panel, 3 creators or artists, and we're going to take it from the opposite perspective, what they will need when they're trying to find these relationships. So I think you all sort of like segued into it perfectly. What I want to say is thanks for everyone who joined us on our call today. I know we went a little long, but I think everyone got something from it. We covered topics. We went into different, we dug in deep, and a big thanks to our panelists, Jack and Jeff, and our moderator, Paul. Thank you very much for being here. A lively conversation, and I, for one, was glad to catch it, and we're looking forward to seeing you all at our next event. So thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Miles. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Jack.
Bye.
Guess we lost Jeff.